Sorry, I've just been informed that I've just said all that with my mic muted. So let's try that again. So welcome. This is our first live stream, so we are going to have a few little technical hitches like that, I think. So bear with me. Yeah, welcome. It's nice to see you all here. This is a webinar. Hello, I'm a Mac. So it's a general overview of macOS, getting to know the Mac better. Hopefully there'll be something there for newbies that are just sort of approaching the platform for the first time, or relatively relative newcomers to it. But also for you seasoned users who've been using Mac for a while. Hopefully we've got some little nuggets in there. You'll be like, oh, I really didn't know that was how that worked, or things that would just help your productivity. So there's a few things to get out of the way first. First up, if you want to sort of know some more about us as Arium, we've got our website link there. We've also got a Facebook page that you can join. And also, if you want to directly contact us, then just use the email info@arium.co.uk, and we'll obviously get back to you as soon as we can. And also, we've got just a few attributions there for, say, thanks for using the 3D models in our intro, and also the music there. So really, yeah, let's get stuck in. I think this is going to be fun, and let's enjoy spending some time together and looking at macOS. So without further ado, let's start. Right, so this is macOS, and just straight off, I just want to say we've just started doing a newsletter, a web newsletter, email newsletter. And the easiest way to sign up for that, if you're not already on our mailing list, is to come to our website, which is just arium.co.uk. And you can, if I just go in a bit closer there, if you just scroll down on the start of a page, we have this link here, join up to our mailing list. If you click on that, it takes you over to a little sign up. Just pop in your details there and hit subscribe, and that way you can make sure you don't miss out on any more of these webinars, and other sort of hints and tips and tricks and things that we will periodically put out. Okay, so macOS. So macOS is the name of the operating system for the Mac computers. An operating system is basically the underpinnings of the Mac system, and it's basically what everything else runs on top of. So it's a very important aspect of the system, and without it we wouldn't get very far. Now Apple in recent years have been naming it after places in California. Previous to that it was Big Cats, but they ran out of Big Cats, so they switched over to the names of various different places in California. That's quite important because a lot of people just get a little bit confused about actually what version of macOS am I running, and they're pretty much on a yearly schedule of release, so a new one every year. Now the easiest way to work out exactly what you're running and some other sort of important information about your machine is via the About My Mac section. So if we head up to the menu bar and select the Apple and then About This Mac, we get this little window pop up, and we'll just go in a bit closer so you can see that. Now you basically have a little tabbed window here, but the key bits of information are actually on this main page. So you can see here that I'm running macOS Big Sur, which isn't quite the latest version. The latest version is macOS Monterey, and that was released quite recently at the beginning of October, I think it was. And so that's, if people are asking you which version of operating system you're running, this is where you come to find out. And it's very important because as Apple move on, they obviously add features and move things around and change the way it's working. So it's very important to know which version of the operating system you're working on, so that you can actually get people to help you in it in a meaningful way. So underneath that, it tells you what they call the Apple Care name. Another very important piece of information if you're dealing with Apple directly or with a service like ourselves, it's actually the Apple Care name that's one of the most important bits for telling us the sort of key bits about the machine. So I'm on a Mac Pro, but you might have their MacBook Pro mid 2015 or MacBook Air early 2018, that kind of thing. And that's where you find that bit of information out. And then really the other key bit of information is the serial number. And lots of people sort of wonder about where to find the serial number on their machine. This is the easiest place if the machine turns on. If it doesn't, then you can actually also find it on the bottom of the machine. It's printed physically on the bottom of the machine. And it's a bit tricky on the sort of the iMacs and things because it's on the bottom of the foot, easier to find on the laptops. Now, you'll also get a few other important bits of information in here, so things like the processor and the memory. But really, generally, you won't need to know about those things. Another good thing along the top here is storage. Now, moving over to the storage tab, it gives us the size and type of the actual drive that we're using, how full it is, and it will also go through and calculate various aspects of your usage here. So things like music, movies, pictures, those kind of things. It knows what those file types are, and so it will list them. You can see they're starting to drop in here. Now, if it doesn't know what a file type is, if it's sort of not a common file type or it's something specific to a particular company's piece of software, then it will turn up in this other. Now, lots of people get quite concerned about this other that grows on their machine. It's not anything to be worried about. Other is actually legitimate files. It might even be cache files that are on the system. They're just not falling into those brackets of the other user definable items there. Okay, so that's the About This Mac window. So let's go back to sort of a greater view of macOS. So it's pretty easily split into sort of three main areas, really. You have at the top here your menu bar, you have your main window, and towards the bottom you have what Apple call the dock. Now, what gets a lot of people confused is that, especially when they've come over from a Windows environment, is actually how do all these elements interact with each other? Where do we go for different bits of the operating system, and how do they all take care of each other and give you indications as to what's there and running and so on? Well, one of the key things to remember is that the menu bar is context sensitive. So depending on what application you have open, your menu bar is going to reflect that. So if I just go in a bit closer here so you can see the menu bar. So at the moment I'm in Safari, so up here it's giving me a menu bar that's relevant for Safari. If I switch over to the Finder, we now have Finder relevant menu items. And so that's to the left on the menu bar. To the right on the menu bar, we have these little widgets up in the corner that are very useful for various different things. So you usually have things like the time and the date. If you're using Siri, you can access Siri from here. Spotlight, the universal search feature, is found here. Things like your Wi-Fi and your Bluetooth. They've also introduced with Big Sur this control center, which allows you to sort of have a greater overview of certain aspects, things like your display, your sound, whether you've got Do Not Disturb enabled, that sort of thing. And then if we go back out down here, at the bottom of the window is the dock. Now, a dock is split into three sections. Previously it was two, so if you're on an earlier version of the operating system, it will just be two sections. But if we just go in here and take a closer look, what you have is a grouping on the left-hand side, which is all of your applications that you want to get to in a reasonable amount of time. So this is completely customizable. You can move these around and change them so that it's just what you want there. Then you have this little section here which is running applications, which you haven't got on the left section. And then to the right you have the ability to look at files and folders, and also the trash. So anything you bin in the operating system ends up in the bin. You'll notice underneath the applications that I've got open there's a little dot. That's just giving us an indication at a glance that these applications are the open ones. Now there are different kinds of applications that generally are single window or multiple window. The Finder is one that is a little bit different. The Finder is the way that you look at all the files on your computer. So it basically looks at the drives and allows you to drill down into the files and folders. It's always running, so it's always going to have a little dot underneath it. You can't quit it. But all the other applications, the ones with the little dots that we've got open currently, basically fall into two brackets of applications. You've got these single window applications, and then you've got multiple window applications. Now, the distinction here is important because single window applications, if you close the window, you quit the app. But if it's a multiple window application, closing the window only closes the window. It doesn't quit the app. And a lot of people don't realize that actually they have a lot of apps running that they didn't realize were running, which obviously all takes resources and is using up parts of your Mac's resources as you go. So to make things efficient, you want to be obviously only running the applications you want to have open. And in these days of SSDs, all the applications tend to open very swiftly anyway. So it's not really a problem if you close an app, but if you've got them running, it's all taking resources away from you. So for instance, let's look at Safari. Safari is a multiple window application. So if I open another window here, I've got two windows open, and we've got these little dots in the top left. These little dots are how we interact with this window, what we want to do with this window. So the little red dot is telling us that we want to close the window. The little yellow one says we want to minimize it to the dock. And the green one is it's a little bit of an interesting one. Another area for confusion, allows you to do various full screen or tiling options. So if I actually close that window by clicking the dot, we've closed that window, but we've still got this window open. If I close that window, we'll notice that Safari is actually still running. So if we look, Safari is still open on the dock, and we've still got it up here in the menu bar. And so Safari is still taking resources away from the machine, but we might not have realized that that was the case. So if I just open that window again, just create a new window. So here we go, this is a new window. Let's have a look again at these little dots and what they do. Obviously, another little catch you out if you're coming from a Windows system is that on the Mac, these are to the left. On a Windows system, you tend to find them on the right. Now, if we press the yellow dot, it shrinks it to the dock. We can obviously click and pull that back. Little fun thing you may not know, if you hold down your left shift key when you press that, you'll get a slightly slower animation, or at least you used to. Looks like they've changed that in Big Sur. You do find that Apple changed things on you, and you have to sort of live with what they've done. So then the green button, if you hover over it, it gives you several options that you can do here. So you can enter full screen. Now full screen apps on the Mac, if we press that and go in, actually hides the menu bar and the dock from you, so it literally goes full screen. If you want those items, you have to hover at the top and down pops your menu bar. Likewise, if you hover at the bottom, up comes your dock. And that can confuse a lot of people, and I've helped out a lot of people that are just like, I can't find how to get out of this app. Actually, you just need to hover over the top and then click that green button again. Now, if we hover over there, we also have the option to tile the window to the left or tile the window to the right. Now that basically halves the window that you're looking at and puts it on one side or the other, so that you can have lots of apps sort of open in like a split screen view. So it's very handy. If you've got more than one display connected to your machine, you also have the option there to move that window to that display. Now, what you might not know is if you hold down your Option key, you get different options. So you get the option to move the window to the left or right side as opposed to tile the window. Slight distinction there in how it does that. I'll leave it to you to play around with that and see how it actually differs. But the key one is this zoom. Now this is actually what a lot of people want when they say full screen. They don't actually want Apple's standard implementation of full screen. They want zoom. So if you hold down the Option key, which on your keyboard is actually the one next to the Command key and is labeled ALT, right down the bottom there. If you hold that down, you get zoom. Now what zoom does is actually make the window as big as it can in that space. Now it does depend on the application. So for instance, if I come over to Finder and I hold down the Option key and click on that, it will expand out to show me everything that's in view here. But in other apps, it will literally take the window completely full screen, but still retain your menu bar and your dock. So again, you can play around with that and see how you find things go. Now, this leads us on to the file system. So everything on your computer is stored on a drive somewhere, and we'll go in a bit closer so that you can see this. On my machine, it's called Macintosh SSD. That's the main drive. That's where macOS is installed and where I keep most of my data. Now, if we have a look here, it's split up into 4 different folders. You have applications. Now this is where every application that you install for all users on the machine lives. So if we go in there, that's where all of our applications are. Underneath that, you've got library and system. Now these are things specific to macOS. We don't need to play around with those. You don't have to be concerned about them. It's just where the operating system itself lives, and then things like preferences for the system. And then you have users. Now, any number of users that you have on the system live in here. So this is where your data is. So mine is residing under Nicholas. And underneath there, you'll have a standard set of folders that Apple give you. One of the key being your desktop. And obviously your desktop is what you see in front of you here. Now, one thing I find a lot with a lot of people is desktop becomes general dumping ground. And unfortunately, that's not what the desktop was designed for. The desktop was actually designed to be a temporary storage, like your desktop. So something where you're putting something temporarily before you move it off to somewhere else. And for this reason, it caches the files that you're putting there. Now that's important because the more files you have there, the more it's having to cache. And it caches this into RAM. And that's a very important resource for your machine. So the more stuff you have stored on your desktop, the more RAM it's having to use to cache those files. And the result is it slows your computer down. So it's a really good idea to try and make sure that you are moving that stuff off of the desktop as quickly as you can. I had one customer who accidentally managed to drag the entire contents of his photos library onto his desktop by accident. And obviously that was gigabytes and gigabytes of data, and it actually had the end result of not letting the machine start up because it was trying to cache everything into RAM. It didn't have enough RAM and he was stuck. So it really does highlight the importance of making sure that what you keep there is is just that sort of temporary stuff. and then you can sort of file it away somewhere else. Now the Finder actually gives you lots of easy ways of accessing things down the left hand side in this favorites section, and you can easily add something there. So for instance, if I wanted to add this projects folder to that, I can just drag it across, drop it in there, and then it's accessible from anywhere that there's essentially a Finder window. So that's inside applications as well. When you're going to like a save as dialog or an open dialog, you have access to all these favorites down the side. So you don't really need to use the desktop as your general dumping ground. You can use other places quite easily, and you're not going to have the penalty of using up that RAM. It's just a little one to give you a little sort of productivity improvement there. Right, so another thing that you might be interested in is the preferences for the Finder. So if we actually go up to the menu bar, oops, sorry, not the dock, the menu bar, up here, and we go Finder Preferences. Now you also note the shortcut. So in menu items, if there's a shortcut available for it, you'll see that it's written next to it, so you can use that shortcut. This shortcut of Command comma is actually a fairly system-wide shortcut, so no matter the application, if they're conforming to Apple's guidelines, then Command comma actually gives you the preferences for that application. A lot of people don't think about preferences for the Finder, but if you go in here, bring it down to the center again. If you go in here, there are actually several options. Now, one of the key ones is, again, for productivity, you have a new Finder Windows show. Now, by default, that's set to recents. Again, this is a cached item, and I find actually, I know where I'm storing stuff. I know where I want to pick stuff up from. And so having to cache this recents and every time I open a new Finder window, it going to this cached results, actually, productivity-wise, slows me down. You can actually come here and choose something else instead. So I've actually got it set to my home folder. So every time I open a new window, I'm boom, straight away in my list of home folder stuff, which is where I should be storing stuff anyway. But you can actually change that to really anything else you want. So by default, you've got some other options in here like desktop or your documents, but you've also got at the bottom other. So if you click on other, it opens a Finder window, and you can then go through and choose specifically what you wanted to do. So obviously I've got this projects folder. If I was using this primarily as a machine where I always went to the projects folder for work that I'm doing, I could set it to projects folder, and then every time I open a new Finder window, I'm getting projects. So that's another key little one there. You've also got show these items on the desktop. So when you connect things to the computer, what's it going to show you on the desktop? By default, it shows you external disks and CDs and DVDs and iPods. But you can also put a tick next to the box if you've got hard disks that you want to see. So that's drives that are internal to the machine. You may have more than one. You also have connected servers. So if you're in a sort of more a business setting, you might have servers that you connect to. Ticking this box makes them visible on the desktop, nice and quick and easy to get to. These don't have an impact on the caching, so you can pop these on or off as you want to. It's not going to be a problem. You also, across the top, obviously there's a few things to dig into, but you have the sidebar preferences. Now, in the sidebar preferences, again, Apple have a default set, but you can actually go in here and customize these. And these are basically showing you what you'll see down the side here. Again, you've got things like the recents, you've got AirDrop applications, but if you found yourself always going to your movies folder, you can actually come and put a tick in the box for movies, and then turns up here so you can access those as well. So let's close that down. Now, another really important thing of the Mac is system-wide settings. Now, these are found in System Preferences. Now, System Preferences, you can find it in a couple of different ways. you've got up in the menu, you can go Apple menu, System Preferences, and launch it that way. If you've got it in your dock, you can click on the icon in the dock. But another little tip is if you want to sort of access specifically very quickly via the keyboard one of the preference panes, then you can actually use the Option key and one of the function keys on your keyboard. So by the function keys, I mean the ones that show you things like adjusting the brightness of your display, things for like expose, volume up and down. If you hold the Option key and one of those, it actually loads that preference pane straight away. So let's just show you. I'll do that again. Sorry, I didn't realize it was on a different view there. So if I'm just going to hold down Option and the brightness key, and it loads System Preferences already in the display settings, which is obviously where I have that brightness slider. But also obviously from there, it's a very quick move to wherever else I want. Now, System Preferences basically is, as it sounds, it's preferences that are system-wide. So these are settings that are going to affect the entire machine, with the exception of iCloud. Now, iCloud, it does affect the entire machine, but not for everybody. These are really very specific to you. So you obviously sign in with your iCloud credentials, and it allows you to do things like have the iCloud Drive, or sync things like bookmarks in Safari or your Photos library. Very, very useful little thing. The thing to remember with iCloud is it's a sync service. Lots of people think it's a backup and they think, oh, it's great, I've got iCloud, I don't need to worry about backup. That's actually not the case. You need to think of iCloud as a sync. Now, iCloud sort of turned up basically because we started having more than one device. You know, in times of a few years ago when devices weren't as prevalent, you may have one computer per household. These kind of things weren't therefore that relevant back then. But now we've got our desktop, we've got a laptop, we've got a phone, we've got an iPad, and if we want to keep all the data in sync, that's where iCloud comes in. And it really does make it very easy to sync those things between those machines. Once you're signed in and have ticked the box next to the things you want it to sync, they will sync. The rest of System Preferences is kind of split up into sort of relevant rungs of things. So you've essentially got sort of system settings, and then you've got hardware type settings. So things like your keyboard, your trackpad, your mouse, startup disk, those sort of things. Now, Apple have done a lot of work recently to try and make macOS and iOS. Now, iOS is what runs on their portable devices like the iPhone. They've tried to make them actually as close to each other as possible so that moving from one to the other is nice and a fluid experience. You look for one thing in one place, it's going to be there sort of on both the systems. And the thing to keep in mind is software update. In times past, it was actually a separate thing all of its own, and then it migrated to the App Store. Now it's in the same place as it is on the phone. It's in the preferences and the software update. And if I click on that, it's going to go out and check to see what software is available and give me the options for updating. Now, I would say, for the most part, it's a good idea to make sure that you keep yourself up to date, because Apple push out security fixes and bug fixes, so it's really good to make sure that you are sort of running as up to date as possible. Now, the exception to that is when they release a new version of the operating system. So they've released macOS Monterey, as I've said. Now, if you are using your computer for work and everything is working as it should and you're in the middle of a project, the general wisdom is to say not to upgrade right now. Let it settle its feet down a bit. let all the early adopters be the beta testers, and let Apple get rid of all the initial sort of things they couldn't anticipate initially. And then once they've released the sort of 0.1 update, so at the moment they're still on 12.0.1. As soon as that becomes 12.1, we know that they've dealt with a lot of the bugs. And as I say, when we finished our project, so we're no longer in a critical situation, needing to make sure that we're up and running for our particular project, then you can go and upgrade. And as I say, it is worthwhile upgrading and making sure that you stay on top of that. The more out of date you get with your operating system, the harder it is to make a direct leap to the newer version. And also, Apple give you new features. It's nice that the operating system now is free. We used to have to pay for it, but for quite a while now it's been free. And so they actually add features and add capability to your machine, but also they're quite good at going in and actually improving the efficiencies of how the machines work by making more efficient code, things like that. So very, very much worthwhile making sure that you at least make sure that your maintenance updates are up to date, and as I say, maybe holding off on moving up to the big version of the operating systems when they come out. Another key thing that people generally ask about is under general, is where have my scroll bars gone? So by default, they turn up automatically based on when you're moving the window. But lots of people really don't like that behavior. If you come into general under system preferences, you can actually change it to always, which is the sort of legacy behavior. And people prefer that kind of method of seeing their scroll windows. That's where you go to get it. With preferences, it's very complex. There's a lot of stuff in here that really do affect the entire system. Generally, Apple's defaults are pretty good, but sometimes you may find that you need to change and tweak things based on the way that you like to use your machine. And another one that I personally dislike is under security and privacy, under the general tab, is this require password immediately after the screen goes to sleep or the screensaver starts. I find that a real pain, so I personally turn it off. Obviously, if you're in an environment where actually it's important to make sure that if you're away from your computer, people can't just get into it, then it's quite handy. However, there is an option underneath the Apple menu to lock your screen when you leave it. And I would levy that that's maybe a better way of doing it. Anyway, if you want to change that setting, that's where it is. Sharing is also a pretty handy tab to look at. Lots of people actually want to be able to share things between machines. Screen sharing is quite handy, allows you to connect to a computer remotely. So for instance, I have this on for our media server, which is a little Mac Mini. It means that it can be safely hidden away inside the cupboard with all the AV gear, and I don't have to physically go and interact with that machine. I can actually use my iPad or another Mac to directly interact with it. There's lots of different sharing things here, things like file sharing, printer sharing. If you've got a printer connected to one computer and you want it to be available to others on the network, then coming and put a tick in the box here is great. Another interesting one is content caching. Content caching basically stores a little cache of files for stuff that you're downloading, so like updates and applications and those kind of things. And it just allows you to put a tick in this box and assign a little bit of space on your drive to cache those things. Now what that means is if you've got other people in the household who are downloading the same apps or the same updates as you, it won't go out to the internet every time to get those updates. It will just pull them from the local caching. So it means that they just A, don't use up your bandwidth, and B, does it a bit quicker because it's already got the files there. It doesn't have to pull them over the internet. Great, so I think we're hitting about 40 minutes now, so it's probably a good time to switch over to our questions. So if you've got a question, feel free to pop it into the chat and we'll then take a look at it. So don't be shy. If you've got anything, you know, no matter how mundane it sounds or trivial, if you've got something that you've really been like, oh, how do I do this, or how does this work, then just pop it in the chat and we can show everybody how to do that particular thing. Yeah, we plan to do more of these live streams. It's obviously just a quick introduction. If there's things that people would really sort of like to look at, like topics or whatever, pop it in the comments, and we can address those in future live web streams. So my colleague Paul has just made a comment to say that Monterey actually allows full screen mode to show the menu bar. So, you know, Apple do sometimes listen to what we say and make changes that are in our best interest. Yes, right. Okay, so we've got a question about file structure. Now, the macOS actually is pretty handy when it comes to file structure. It gives you lots of different ways of getting to the same thing. So in that way, it can foster quite a sort of a messy way of working. But with just a few little ways of doing things, you can really sort of sort that out. And that's folders are your friend. So if I just go in closer here, it's very easy to get this home folder very clogged just by sort of storing stuff in the top level. But actually, create a folder for it or move it to somewhere where it's applicable. So obviously Apple give you these standard options of things like your desktop, your documents, movies, music, pictures. You know, they're all there for sort of relatively relevant things that we do. But within that, it's always good to then take your own bit of file structure to it. So for instance, I've got projects here. So this is things that I'm working on. So I created this folder, projects, and to create a folder, it's very easy. File, you go up to the up to your Finder window here, menu bar, and go File, New Folder, or as you can see, the shortcut Command Shift N. Or you can also right-click New Folder. So if we create a new folder, it allows us to name it. So we'll call this Useful Folder. And then inside there, you can also create new folders for different things. So obviously, my projects folder, I've got a folder for each project. Now, when it comes to my live stream, I've obviously got all the assets that I was using there. So I've actually then got folders for things here. So I've got assets that are being used in the titles themselves. I've got the rendered output of the titles all in here so that they're easy to find. So all these kind of things, you just name them with things that are useful to yourself, so that you've got that little bit of structure there. And it doesn't need to be a lot of structure, but just a little bit of structure actually really helps you. And as I say, you can quite easily pull these out to the menu bar if you need to, so you can get quick access to them. Another quick little tip is if you have a selection of files, if you right click over them, you can do new folder with selection. And when I click that, it literally does as it says. It creates a new folder with all those files inside it. So if you've got a bit of a jumble of files all around, selecting them, right clicking, new folder with selected files, pops them all in there. Easy way of getting them nice and tidily away. Another thing to note is how do you select files. Command A is a good one. Select all. Again, you can find that underneath the edit menu. Another thing that's really useful with selections is the command key. If you hold down the command key, it allows you to select non-contiguous files. So if you're wanting to just pick certain ones, you can do that. And then also your shift key is also your friend here. If you've got a whole set that you want to select, so say I want to select from attributions all the way down to title pool. If I select attributions, hold down my left shift key and then select title pool, it selects everything in between. So some handy little selection tools there. All right, okay, so we've got a question about storage on iCloud. So iCloud Drive, very, very handy. As I say, it allows you to do the syncing between your devices. Now, the thing to remember about iCloud Drive is it's not extra storage. The files that you have in iCloud Drive are on your machine. There is a little bit of a misconception out there that sort of buying extra iCloud storage gets you more storage than the machine physically has. To a degree, it can, because if you run out of space, the Mac can intelligently handle what files it's storing locally. But effectively, you need to think of it as this is space on my machine, because it will continue to take up that space until it's filled your machine, at which point you need to be doing something different anyway because you've filled the space on your machine. So iCloud Drive is very useful. It's nicely integrated into the Mac. So in the Finder windows, you have a complete section for it, and you can sort of save whatever you want in there and just use it as a standard bit of storage on your machine. So you can create folders in there, you can create documents in there, all that kind of stuff you can do right here in the drive, and it will sync it across the machines. So on things like your iPhone and iPad, that'll be in the Files app, or under iCloud Drive on macOS. Okay. Any tips for using Time Machine and iCloud at the same time? So so Time Machine is Apple's backup facility, and it sort of comes in two parts. You've got the bit which actually does the backup, and then you've also got the app which allows you to browse the backups. You configure it under the Time Machine preference. Now, the question here is specifically about Time Machine and iCloud. And the thing to remember about Time Machine is it does a backup of the entire machine the very first time you tell it to do a backup, and then every time that drive is plugged in, it will basically take a poll once every hour and backs up what's changed since the last time it did a backup. So it's never doing a complete backup every time. It's only doing the incremental changes. iCloud Drive, because it's files that are actually physically on your machine, it will back those up as well. The only obvious difference is once it starts doing active management of that, because you're running low on space, then those files aren't physically residing on your machine anymore. So some of them may be in the cloud but not on the machine. So if there's stuff that you absolutely want to be sure it's always going to be backed up to the Time Machine, then you need to make sure that you're not necessarily storing it in the iCloud Drive, but in a different folder on your machine. So long as iCloud isn't doing this active management of files, then you're fine. So it's only really a problem if you're running really very short. Okay, so we've got a question about identifying which iCloud you have. So iCloud is using your Apple ID, and an Apple ID is an email address as a username and a password. So the easy way to know if you're using more than one Apple ID is, are you using more than one email username to log into things? And if you check on the various devices in the iCloud section, it should tell you exactly which you're using, so you can try and identify which ones are being used on different devices. Now, if they're all the same, then you're obviously only using one Apple ID, and that's the ideal situation. However, lots of us have come through various different things about various different ways that Apple have approached this problem over the years, and so we may have many Apple IDs. I certainly do, and you can do a degree of amalgamation, but if you've done things like purchase applications and things on one or on different ones, unfortunately there's no way of aggregating that data short of using the family option. So you can basically make a family group, and then all of the purchases that you've made under one Apple ID are available to all of those Apple IDs. I suspect if you've got things saying it's full or not, there's a few different things relating to that. By default, Apple only give you 5 gigabytes of storage in the cloud. Now, if we're using that on our phones and our Macs, it's quite easy to fill that up quite quickly, and you're basically buying space to sync. So if you've not got enough space to sync what you're the files that you're using, as I say, which can include things like backups on the phone and so on, then it will ask you to say, well, I've reached the capacity here, do you want to buy some more storage? And it's pretty good value. The next step up, which is 50 gigabytes, so quite a jump from the 5, is 79p a month. So it's next to nothing. So that's one place it may be asking you about it. The other may literally be that it feels that you haven't got enough space on the machine for you to have all the files you have stored in the cloud locally to it. So it's getting on and doing some of that sort of active management, and that's why you may see some differing explanations from time to time as to it's full or not. Let's see if there's any other questions there. I think we've covered them all now. Has anybody got any other questions that they'd like to pop in? If not, we're sort of approaching our time to wrap up. Try and keep this sort of fairly concise for you so that you're not spending hours and hours. I've certainly watched live webinars where I'm feeling, this is good stuff, but I've been here 3 hours now and I want to leave. So let's try and make sure we keep these nice and succinct, so that everybody can enjoy them and get the best out of them. So the question here we've got is, if iCloud is really on my machine, why does Apple charge for it? So what you're being charged for is extra storage space on their servers. So as I say, they give you 5 gigabytes for free when you have an Apple ID. But if you're wanting to manage more data than that, then you need to pay them for more space on the server. Now, the best way to think of iCloud is, if you imagine Apple's servers being somewhere else in location, and you've got your various devices, all those devices are looking at those Apple servers to see whether they're up to date or not. And if they're not, they'll pull the files down that they need, and if there's files that they've got that aren't up there yet, they'll push them up. So it's that space on their server that you're actually paying for. That's what they're asking for, that 79p a month initially, and then it goes up to $249 for 200 gigabytes, I think, and I can't remember the leap from there. I think you go to 2 terabytes after that. So it's not that you're paying for storage which is already on your machine. You're paying for space to sync those files between your devices. It's interesting to note that as time goes on and Apple add more and more services to their repertoire. So you've got things like the Apple TV Plus. You've obviously got iCloud. You've got iTunes with Apple Music. And they've just got now the Fitness Plus as well. There's all these services. They have brought out a new sort of encompassing service called Apple One, and so it's just one subscription which allows you access to multiples of these things. There's a few different options to reach your price points and how much of your family want to use it, and that's really quite good value. Inside that is included cloud storage, so it might be worth looking at that if you feel that you want to sort of move over. Right, so if that's it, if nobody's asking any other questions, then we can start to wrap things up here. Right. Right, okay, yeah, so let's wrap this up now. Obviously we can come back for more. As I say, if you want to pop in the comments underneath this video, if you have any sort of other topics you'd like us to look at or broach in the future, then pop them there and we can get stuck into those at a later date. And again, if there's things that you liked about the stream or you didn't like about the stream, let us know. We can then improve it. Sorry for the sort of few little glitches and things, no audio at the beginning and so on. Just getting used to the system. As I say, it's the first time I've done this, so we'll get better as time goes on. And yeah, thanks for joining me, and we look forward to seeing you again. Okay.